Hi, everyone. This is Craig Zelzer from PCDN. Delighted to be here with Aniqa Nawabi for Season 10, Episode 2. Yay, we made it through not a decade, but the 10th season, where it just started last week. We're delighted to be with you here today. Aniqa has been working at the forefront of community and social engagement, incredible roles, and we're delighted that she's made time out of her very busy schedule to share her expertise with us. She's a nonprofit and public policy professional who has over a decade of experience and is currently working or serving as the Muslim Community Network's executive director, which is an amazing organization based in New York City. And they're working on international interfaith engagement for Muslim youth, focused on peace building and conflict resolution, and doing a lot of interfaith engagement, both in the US and around the country and the world. Prior to working at MCN, she was the director of development with the Chaya Community Development Organization, an anti-poverty nonprofit that works on housing and immigrant rights for the South Asian community in New York City, and helped lead $1 million a year budget and fundraising campaign. She's originally from Bangladesh and grew up in Germany and South Africa. And before coming to the US as an immigrant, and holds a master in public administration from NYU, the School of Public Service. We had probably like 4 seasons ago, one of the directors of career services from NYU, Sora Bilal, on our career podcast, so you can check that out. And also a degree from BA from the City University of New York, Queens College. My dad went to City College many years ago. She's an adjunct assistant professor of business at Nonprofit Management NYU. She's also the mother of 3 and a very avid traveler. We'll have to see where her preferred destinations are, and also speaks Bengali, Hindi, and Farsi. For people who have not joined us before, this is a live stream podcast, which we do on LinkedIn and YouTube. We'd love to know where you're watching from, particularly on LinkedIn. So in the comment box, you can share, if you're watching from London or the UK or Colombia or wherever. After about 15 minutes, we'll start bringing in questions from the audience. So feel free to share your comments and questions and tips, and we'll show them on the screen. The episode will last about 45 minutes to an hour. We do have 100 other episodes with amazing changemakers all over the world, from probably 25 countries and all sorts of sectors, and deeply appreciate if people might share and particularly rate the podcast on your favorite podcasting platform. So you can just go to PCN Global and check out the podcast. Catalina, do you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about where we're participating from?
Hi, everyone. For those of you longtime listeners, I was the original host of the Social Change Career podcast. But in honor of season 10, I was called back. I was fired, actually. No, I'm kidding. Technical decisions. Anyhow, one thing led to another, and Craig started hosting. But I am super delighted to be here and to have a conversation with Aniqa. Hi, Andrea. How are you? We've had a few people that work on interfaith in the past 10 seasons, but I think this is the first time that we're actually talking to someone who directly works with the Muslim community, and we are delighted. I don't want to introduce myself anymore, but I want to make an invitation, because this week something really important happened to us at PCDN Global, is that we launched a course that we've been dreaming for years and years of making. It's a cohort-based course based on an amazing platform called Maven. And if you are wanting to change careers, if you're bored where you are, if you're tired of sending resumes and not getting responses, if you really want to have the experience of 2 seasoned professionals in the social impact work, this course is for you. So check it out. Craig can tell you the link real quick and type it. But we launch Accelerate Your Social Impact Career, and we hope to see you. But now it's time to, no further ado, welcome Aniqa. Thank you again on behalf of everyone at PCDN Global. And thank you all for being here, watching us, and later on our listeners, which is my favorite format in the podcast. So that's it for me.
And welcome Andrea and Onyinye. Andrea is the founder of Atelier app and a proven American architect working for sustainability. So she's joining us from Aspen. So hopefully you can send us a picture of the snow. She should be on the podcast hopefully in the next few weeks. So just to jump in, what type of change have you been seeking to advance throughout your career? Or is there a central theme to how you've seen the positions you've had where the impact you've been trying to advance has been focused?
Of course. Well, thank you, Craig and Catalina, again, for this incredible opportunity for me to share my journey and experience here with such a great global group of professionals all around the world. So what are the type of changes? So what I've seen throughout my career is that, I went from moving from being like an administrator or running programs or running organizations to now slowly getting into the field of thought leadership and developing thought leadership around issues of peace building, inclusivity, diversity. So a change that I want to see, improve myself, to see myself improve on, is really how to be, a public leader, a thought leader, how to be able to advocate for the needs of my community and venues, sharing those stories from my community and elevating the needs of my community. So I'm from doing copying and writing to now slowly moving into the area where I'm trying to build thought leadership around the issues that I care about and that I'm working on right now.
And just a follow-up question, then Kata will go next. So when you talk about, because you worked on immigrant rights and housing rights, now you're working on, a lot to do with interfaith and intra-community engagement. So can you talk a little bit about the philosophy or your theory of change in terms of when how you see your role or the organizations you work for, how they're engaging both within the communities that you interact with and across communities, and how do you measure or think about the type of change that you're trying to influence?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I like to put the category of work that I'm currently doing in the area of civil society. So MCN, Chaya, these are all civil society-based organizations that are really at the interface between policymakers, government, and the public. So I think we play an incredibly critical role because what we are able to do is we're able to kind of tailor some of the projects or programs that the government wants to implement in the community. We're able to tailor it to communities who traditionally wouldn't have access to those programs, who traditionally would not be able to have an understanding of what those programs are and how they can help uplift their lives and so forth. So in New York City, New York City is a global city. We have communities represented from all over the world. And the major barriers that these communities face are language barriers. Poverty is an issue. Having to, not being able to spend their time in working on issues of civic engagement or voting, election rights, and things like that, because, immigrant communities were busy working and providing for our families. So civil society is able to represent these communities, in spaces where we can advocate for them when there are, certain advocacy issues to work, and we're able to provide the services. So just for example, at Chaya Community Development, we would actually have certain housing programs, how our communities, South Asian communities, can access housing programs that the government is rolling out, right? So Chaya played a critical role in ensuring that our communities understand these projects, these programs, and so in reverse, getting access to them, right? So I think these types of organizations, MCN, Chaya, and I'm sure all over the world, we play a very critical role in interfacing between communities who have not traditionally had access or who are looking to and gain access. And so we represent those kinds of communities.
Okay, so I want to go back to your first answer because it really resonated with me when Craig asked you, and you're like, well, right now I am entering the stage of being a thought leader, right? So it shows that you've had an amazing trajectory and you're in a level that probably a lot of people are saying, what a thought leadership, what's going on? But I want to back from entering thought leadership level career to backing out into the nuts and bolts, because this is the Social Change Career podcast and we want to give people, so based on people's journeys and individuals and professionals journeys, a little bit of tips for them. So looking back to your career trajectory, Aniqa, did you carefully plan, and has the plan work, or has it been like serendipitous, or how do you characterize your career plan, and on what sort of advice do you give people that are not entering thought leadership level, but just figuring out at the beginning, or they kind of stuck, they don't know where they really are?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I have to tell you, I've been through all the trials and tribulations of figuring out what I want to do, where do I end up. So I've definitely been through those career milestones, I guess you can say. So let me start with saying that, I started uh, in college. I think one of the biggest advices I can give you and your audience members is that try to try to focus on what you want to do very early on in your life, and it really needs to start in college, because the sooner you're able to kind of understand, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to know exactly what you want to do, but understand and figure out what area you want to be in, right? Because right in college you are able to start building those skills. You can get the tips you want to get, and you can build the skills that will eventually make you competitive in the job market. And let me tell you, even though I had internships, I had fellowships, the job market is incredibly competitive. And I have done both hiring, and I've been in the place where I'm trying to get hired. So I can understand like what are employers looking for, right? And I can tell you most of the time employers are looking for exactly the type a person that has a job previous to get into the new job most of the time. This is so you really need to build those skill sets if you're looking to get into uh, 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 a job, a dream job that you're really looking forward to. um I still haven't achieved my dream job yet, which I'll discuss later, but I feel like I'm building it myself up towards trying to get to that dream job. And at the end of the day, it does start from the very beginning. You need to know the nuts and bolts. Even right now, as an executive director, I am doing nuts and bolts. It's just that I have now a team to do the nuts and bolts, right? But you need to understand how to write emails, how to have excellent communication skills and writing skills. You need to know how to even do a simple copying of in a copy machine, how to uh, uh, operate a copying machine. Yes, you need to know, because these are all processes that advance an organization. And so you need to know those nuts and bolts to eventually get up to the level where you now have you've hired people under your team to allow you to be the thought leader that you want to be or can be. So long story short, the advice for your audience is really that try to figure out what you want to do very early on, get experiences in those fields, through internships or fellowships. And then from there, apply to jobs or institutions. So one thing that I've always looked into, actually, no, not necessarily. There are two things you can look into: institutions or job functions. What I are job functions, because I wanted to build those skills in community development and anti-poverty work. So it wasn't the institution that I was going after. It was the job functions. Now that I've kind of built up those skills, I feel more confident to apply to the institutions that I've always dreamed of applying to, you know? So I would say that has been my career trajectory. And yeah, there were certain things that were serendipitous, and you end up loving the thing that you're doing, and loving the job function you're doing. But yeah, have an eye on the goal, but and build up slowly towards it through your skill set building and so forth.
Thank you so much. That was great. That was a great answer. And I love the distinction between job function and the ideal organization. I think that is a gold nugget.
Yes.
Correct. Back to you in studio.
We have a lot of people from Nigeria today, so please feel free to let us know where you're watching from and start sharing if you have questions or comments. So Aniqa, so you're working on really deep-rooted social, structural, and cultural challenges, you know, whether it's poverty or, I mean, the rise in antagonism and hate speech towards Muslim Americans and all sorts of groups that don't represent traditional white America is increasing. So if you think about the course of your career, how have you sustained, you know, because poverty is a huge issue.
Yeah.
And obviously the US, we don't have our priorities right because we could reduce poverty radically. We just don't do the right policy. So, you know, whether it's hate speech, interfaith dialogue, you know, reducing poverty, increasing access to housing, how do you stay vibrant? And when you're working on such large challenges, and what are some areas where you see like your work or the teams you're part of have had success that you're proud of?
Yeah, great question. Yes. So how do you stay vibrant? I think, you know, at the end of the day, you have to be very passionate about the work that you do. You have to have a liking and a passion to be in the field that you're in. You know, we are, you know, and one thing is that in the US, while there is a huge number of civil society organizations, and yet there are really big challenges, but you will also find really great allies in your work that are also trying to advance towards a better society. And the United States, it does provide you in that way a platform, an avenue for like organizations like ours and others, advocacy work to kind of thrive in a way, right? Even if it doesn't reach to the policy level, right? So I think, you know, in any society, there are challenges, and you have to pick what is, you know, the challenge you want to address. And one, I guess, skill set that I think that I to be extremely important in any of this type of community organizing work is advocacy. Can you advocate for the needs of your community? Because if you want to reach policy, if you want to impact policy, you have to be able to advocate for the needs of the community. And a very good advocate is someone who knows and understands through what systems and mechanisms your advocacy is going to make an impact. I'm going to give you a direct example. Right now, MCN, we are working on a resolution that we co-authored, a resolution that we are looking to pass in the New York City Council. It's a religious diversity, it's a curriculum to introduce religious diversity education in New York City public schools so that we can prevent hate, so that we can deepen the understanding of religious minorities in our community, right? So, you know, the topic is huge. We have 60 different faith groups who are in support of this resolution. Now, yes, you can organize your own community and rally them around a great cause like this, but if you don't know how to advocate for a resolution or a bill or a policy in the areas of where there's power, then it doesn't really go anywhere. So I think one of the biggest skill sets, so if it could be anything, anti-poverty, housing laws, economic development, religious diversity, whatever it is, you have to build the skill set of knowing what the mechanisms of changing policy are. You don't have to be a lawyer. you could just be an advocate, a strong advocate of a community, and know the mechanisms and apply those mechanisms to reach to the goal that you want to reach. So what is our goal? Just for this example that I'm giving you, our goal is to pass the resolution, but that's not going to change anything. But it's going to state that New York City Council members, who are representative of the 8 million population of New York City, that they want to see a religious diversity curriculum. That puts pressure on the Department of Education to come up with a curriculum, right? So it's not the end goal. It's just the process towards that end goal, right? So I think sorry for my long-winded answer, but what I want to emphasize here is that in whatever field you're in and you want to be able to change something in society, you have to understand how to be a strong advocate and know the mechanisms for changing policy.
So just one quick follow-up question, then Kata will go. So I still teach some at the grad level. I was a professor for 10 years, and I think we had one skills course on advocacy, but in your experience, did you learn these advocacy skills through education? You learned it by doing, and if someone says, oh, I want to do similar work to what Aniqa is doing or you're doing, whether it's on interfaith engagement or anything else, how do you learn the advocacy skills? Like, what are the pathways to develop those?
Right. Perfect. Really good follow-up. I learned advocacy on the job, in the environment, in the job environment that I was in, learning from my peers and my colleagues. It wasn't a skill. The skill set that you can learn in school is good communication skills, good writing skills. Those skills translate into whether a person is able to be a good advocate, but then you also have to have the personality to want to be out in the community and gather community members and put in, like punchy kind of campaign statements and things like that. You have to have so it's a combination of the personality and the skill set of being able to write. One other huge skill set that I think is needed, or rather it's growing in the current economy, is marketing skills. I can tell you that I probably spent a whole lot of time marketing the ideas and campaigns that we're working on. And what does this mean? Putting together flyers, doing social media strategy, right? Just on Twitter, if you can tag the right people, they will find attention to your needs and causes, right? So I think a big part of the advocacy skill set is knowing communications, social media strategy, marketing strategy, because if you employ the right strategy, your whatever you're advocating for will get to a much elevated level in that way. So yeah, I definitely learned all these by doing, like by being in the institutions that I'm in. So yeah, I don't know if it's I think what universities and schools can do is to describe the mechanism, because one thing that I learned when I was in grad school was, how does the American government work? Who are the representative bodies? How do they get elected? And those are really important things to know and understand. But once you are in community organizing, you understand what the needs of the community are and how can you communicate this to these bodies. So that's what I would say.
I want to stay on in the topic of skills, and then we're gonna shift gears for a little bit. But I was thinking, like, I want to throw in the F word, and by the F word I mean fundraising, because I think this is a critical issue for civil society organizations, whether they are in New York City or whether they are in Medellin or whether they are in Nigeria. And Craig and I have been in the NGO or are familiar with NGO processes and donor fatigue and fundraising. I think it gets harder every year. When in quick exploration of your LinkedIn page, it's amazing one of the first things I see is that you were a superstar and really delivered results in terms of raising funds for your organization. So my two, I guess, small parts with regards to fundraising as a skill is what advice do you give to people that are here listening who perhaps are
Mhm.
facing issues like how do you successfully fundraise these days, and
Yeah.
where, yeah, like what advice do you have, and tell us a little bit like how come you're so successful? We want to know your secret sauce.
Thank you, Catalina. I don't know if there's a secret sauce, but I know that there is definitely a process, which is something. So, I didn't get into my field because I wanted to be a fundraiser, right? I started in the community organizing field as a manager of resource development. I wanted to be a program officer, but that role wasn't open. So I started in the fundraising sector. And fundraising is the sector that is, if you're looking at a civil society organization or a, a larger international NGO, it's the side of administration and advancement. The programs is a whole other side, right? So, but what happened is once I got into the fundraising field, I realized how critical it is. It is the bread and butter of any organization. You can talk all about impact, but if you don't have your bread and butter and the fundraising skills, you can't have an impact, right? So one thing is that absolutely fundraising is very critical. And even if you are a program officer or you're working in just community organizing and anti-poverty programs, whatever, you still need to know fundraising, because the skill sets in fundraising are being able to identify a pipeline for the sustainability of your projects. Okay. And so for me, fundraising, it's both a science and it's a personality, a skill set that you really want to be in and thrive in. And not a lot of people enjoy it, because I understand. It's like you're asking people for money. And I mean, this is more in the individual donor field, right? You're asking directly for people for money, and that can get exhausting. You hear a lot of no's. I heard a lot of no's in my career. But what keeps driving me is that, listen, I'm working to fundraise for a mission that is to do a better good, right? So this is not a no to me. You're saying no to a mission. So it's like you have to frame your thought process in that way. So just quickly, going back to fundraising and how critical it is. So for fundraising, it's both a skill and a process. And I think what has worked for me is the science of it, in the sense that there are very clear benchmarks to understand if you're being successful in fundraising. How many meetings have you had? How many grant letters have you written? Letters of interest. How have you prospected your pipeline, your next set of grants? How well is your prospecting? How well are your communication materials? So, you have to translate what the impact of your program team is into your fundraising documents, right? So having very clear lines of communication and marketing materials are very critical to being a successful fundraiser. And then I would say the fifth is the personality. You have to have passion. You have to be really driven by the mission of the organization, so that when you are going to a meeting with a donor or a funder, you're able to explain and communicate that to your funder. So the secret sauce, again, is really, I think, building up a pipeline. So I work a year ahead. So right now I'm fundraising for next year, because I've already raised the funds for my organization last year. I'm raising funds for next year. What does it have to take if I want to go from $1 million organization to, let's say, 1.5? I don't want to promise, and I've never made this promise that, I'm going to raise 5 million in 12 months, because I find that to be kind of impossible unless you have a donor in your pipeline that will die and give you a huge insurance policy. No, I want to be because remember, as a fundraiser, you have to sustain your current funds and grow and grow to an existing number. So it's not just, oh, I can say, yeah, I'm going to raise $1 million in 5 years, okay, but you have to sustain your current funding as well, right? So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that if I want to grow my budget to another $500,000, I am setting up meetings with funders right now. I'm seeking out and prospecting. I use a tool called Instrumental, which is a grant finding tool for New York City and US-based organizations. And I'm looking, okay, which funders match my programs, right? I'm going to then find a program officer, send off an email to them. If I'm being very strategic, I'm going to find those program officers. I'm going to find events where those program officers are going, and I'm going to make sure that I make an introduction of myself at those venues, at those conferences, and so forth. I have my program team attend conferences whenever they're able to, so that, again, the name of MCN is exposed. And I tell them, for each conference, I want to at least see 5 business cards coming back to us and explaining how you're going to build the relationship with these people. So it's a science. There are clear benchmarks. The more you do it, the more exposure, the more people know about you, and that's how money comes to your organization. And then it's you have to have the personality to be able to go out there, meet people, talk about your organization, bring them in, do email follow-ups immediately, have good tools, presentation tools that you can show them. And also being able to show one critical piece of communication is that how does your work align with their mission and their work? Certain philanthropies, which is private, there's a sense of uncertainty whether they're going to fund you or not, because these are private donors, private families at the end of the day. But then there are certain other, like community development foundations, right? They have a certain process, and they you can go back to them. If you ever get rejected, you can say, hey, how did we not align? You can get a explanation. And so it's like, the more you try, the more you understand and know what funder priorities are and who is aligned with your work and so forth. So just being able to always communicate how your work is aligned is a really good piece of information you always want to carry as a fundraiser.
I don't know if you realize this, Aniqa, but you just gave us a micro course on fundraising, and it's the best micro course on fundraising I've ever taken. Thank you for being so generous and transparent in explaining the process. But what I love the most is that a lot of times you feel that there, even the people in the NGOs, there is a lot of fatigue. But what I hear from you is like a no nonsense, no excuses. This is a lot of hard work for a very good cause, and you have it's a public document in LinkedIn. You have the results to show. It's very energizing, very clear, and yes, it is very hard, but I think that this can be, the system and the process can be applied to any organization, big or small, and it's a whole lot of work, but it sounds amazing. So thank you for that, and thank you for the micro course. You're very good. You're a very good communicator. And now I want to take you a little bit to maybe putting you on the spot, and I apologize for it, but looking at where you are in interfaith, community engagement, civil society, advocacy organization, where do you see the areas of growth in the sector you are? You mentioned prior in one of your answers that the marketing, social media, you saw it as an area expansion. Do you see any other areas of expansion? And could you imagine what would be some job titles in the future? This is the part where I put you on the spot, but it's okay if you, but any job titles in 5 or 7 years, what would they look like?
Yeah, great. This is, and let me just quickly, I want to add that the reason why I'm able to give you these micro courses is because, like I said, but as a lot of your audience members, I've been in those shoes where, you know, people tell you, oh yeah, this is how it works, but it's not how it works. It's like you've got to get the micro detail of exactly what do you mean, how do you get from A to B, right? In that, so I've applied for jobs that I thought I was a fit for, right? But I wasn't a fit for, because what is asked for in the job description isn't necessarily the skills that they're looking for. I mean, and until you go through the trial and error, you don't realize it and understand it. So that's why I'm like, I know exactly how it is when it comes to, understanding like what it takes to get from that A to B, how to be that good fundraiser or communicator or advocacy person. So that's why I want to mention that I've been in those shoes. Going back to your question, what are the kind of skill sets that I increasingly see that are needed? I have to tell you, Forbes magazine has listed is going on in coming years. This year, it would definitely will be, because the thing is, the internet is exploding. A lot of work is being done on the through the web, right? So it's no longer where you need to have so let me tell. So what am I saying? I think digital graphics is going to be a huge, even for the NGO world, right? This is not just for the media and Hollywood. No, for NGOs, for civil society, for government, even being able to clearly communicate the policies, the issues to your audience, that is going to raise money for you, because it's going to reach your donors and it's going to reach the population you're trying to impact. Okay. So media, digital graphics marketing is a really big issue. Another thing that I've seen a huge growth in the United States, at least, I'm not sure if it's the same, it probably is in Europe as well, is the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? I think every corporation now has a diversity officer, and these are all great things. These are all great moves to make sure that there is equity in these institutions. But our community members, people from the Global South, we have a huge contribution that we can make in this field to explain what are the needs of our community members to be able to get those types of jobs and so forth, right? So I think there's going to be a continued growth in the DEI communities, in the DEI field. Digital marketing I talked about. I think there's huge potential in the growth of civil society. And I know it's very much established here in the US and Europe, although it's booming, it's growing. In fact, civil society is called the third sector. I teach about this at NYU, in the sense that you have the government, you have the corporate private sector, and then you have civil society. And there's going to be a huge growth of this. I think, and there's a huge potential of growth for this in the Global South, in developing economies. So I think there's going to be growth there. And other things like, let me tell, job titles, right? Director of Special Initiatives, change management specialists, right? Because institutions are really looking to change their work cultures. Because of the pandemic, institutions are looking to adopt more hybrid policies, or policies that are going to benefit the families and their employers and employees and so forth. Corporate social responsibility is going to be a huge issue, right? Because I think governments, if we are to follow the SDG model, which most are concentric around, I think most governments and corporations are becoming concentric around the SDGs, then you really are going to be seeing these types of changing institutional cultures, roles, functions, and so forth. So I think that's where you're going to see like a growth in in job functions in the future.
Thank you so much, Aniqa. And I think maybe, Craig, we need to start wrapping up because she has 3 babies, and I think I can hear one of them. But don't feel bad because in this podcast we had a great traditions. We've had dogs and roosters, so and then we have added baby, and it's the reality of our lives, right? If we're
It
true to
is.
working, successful working women, we have to run with crying babies, and absolutely we would understand if you have to go because very important.
No, I'm good.
Mine
I'll have
doesn't
a
cry
babysitter.
anymore.
Okay.
Oh, ours is almost 12, so we we don't have to go tend to him.
So I think I'll jump, and we have 10 more minutes. So, and thank you, amazing Aniqa, for all your insights. And we've been trying to share resources of things that you mentioned for upskilling and just building. So 2 questions. One is, I'm thinking about on the hiring end, whether you've been hiring at MCN or other places. Can you talk about a recent hire or in the past year or 2, and just like walk us through, let's say, a mid-level hire, how many applications you got? I mean, nothing sensitive. And then what makes the difference between the people or the candidates you choose to interview? It doesn't mean, I mean, obviously only have one offer, but like what makes a difference for at least someone getting through the pile to be considered, and your recommendations for job applicants?
Great question. Yes, at MCN, we definitely are hiring. We are looking for a communications manager. We're looking for a program assistant. Yes, we definitely are. I haven't posted them online yet, but we're in the process of getting to that. And so what really stands out for me in candidates are it's both skills and personalities. And I have to tell you one thing that I value the most. You might not have all the skill sets, but if you have a willingness to learn, the personality to learn. One thing that I'm also noticing in the job market nowadays is that folks don't stick to a career, right? They move around and they move to, people are, maybe, and I apologize, like the younger generation is like very much like like they don't stick to anything, right? What I value in a candidate is someone who's really willing to learn, who has a lot of integrity in their work. Hey, if you made a mistake, just own the mistake, right? That shows integrity. If you don't know something, just share. Hey, I don't know this, can you help me learn? That shows integrity. So I think a lot of applicants, they say, I will do this and I know this. Don't do that. Just be, hey, even if you don't have all the skill sets, that, hey, if I was interviewing, what I would like to hear is, I might not have all the skill sets, but I'm really willing to learn, and I can tell you that I've done these things that I think can be transferable, and I will be able to do this job. Other nuts and bolts things that are important for job candidates: being able to meet deadlines, being able to communicate with your colleagues, whether if you are taking a day off, if you're available. And I know it's getting to the nitty-gritty, but these are things that become red flags for supervisors, for people who are hiring you, or if you're in the job for 30 days and you see these things happening, then it's like red flags, right? Communicating, being honest, having integrity, showing up and being on time in team meetings, staff meetings, even if it's virtual, and take initiative. This is one thing that I absolutely see that I value in candidates. Like, I have team members who are, they go beyond what is given to them to want to show that they have initiative, they have leadership skills. Everyone needs to have leadership skills, right? Not just the executive director, but even an intern needs to show that they can be a leader in the organization by coming up with ideas, by being innovative, by suggesting maybe something's not working right. Let me suggest this thing to you, and that might work right. All things that show leadership initiative, and a personality that you're very much invested in growing and leading with the organization. These are things that, so it's like a combination of personality, but I think I weigh heavily on the personality than the skill sets. Because, a lot of, you have to provide people opportunities to develop skill sets, okay? But if you don't have the personality to want to learn, then you're not going to get the skill set. Oh, and, listen, I've been in those positions where I was looking for my first break. I was looking to get in, right? And no one was giving me the opportunity because I didn't have that specific skill set. But I knew that I could learn it. I had the educational background, I could be a good learner, and I had the personality and integrity to tell you that, hey, if I don't know something, I'm willing to learn, I'm willing to put in the time to make sure that I function the best in my job role. So if you have this type of a personality and thinking cap, you will be successful in finding the roles you need to.
I mean, I think this is huge coming from the director of an organization to talk so much or to give so much weight to personality. By the way, I totally agree with you. It's hard to, well, personality is hard because there are, as you said, some skills you can learn, but personality is one of the things that we said in PCDN is don't fake. Like that you can't fake something you're not. You have your strengths, and we all have weaknesses. One of the things that we see a lot, and this is coming from more from social entrepreneurship and that kind of world, is that they're almost, and we can see it to the extreme where like tech giants are not even taking into account your university education, but people just have to show their portfolio and whether you can do this task or not. We are very well aware that in the social impact sector, for lack of a better term, that's not the case. But in the debate of credentials versus education, how do you see this tension coming from a civil society NGO?
Right. That's a great question, and I think, I don't know if I have the right, if I still know what the right answer to that debate is. That, from what I learned, is this, right? I think an education gives you the theoretical understanding of how the world works. It gives you the theoretical understanding of where you are, what your place is. Like, yeah, exactly. In the social impact sector, right? This is not a technical field where you need a nursing degree or a doctor or a scientific field. This is the social sciences, right? I appreciate knowing that a candidate who's applying to a job role here at MCN has a theoretical background and understanding of how policy works, of how government works, of how power works, how power networks, what is international relations, how does economic develop, what is the history of economic development. I definitely appreciate someone who had that exposure to those theories and theoretical backgrounds, right? But in terms of skill sets, right, that is the job, again, employers, they look for so just in my field, right, have you organized in the fields? And so if you've organized let's say a tenant association, or you've written a letter to Congress and you've had 500 people sign on to that letter, right? Those are very important assets to have. But you know what? People coming out right from college or graduate school, even, because like I went from college straight to graduate school, right? I didn't have like a career in between where I had like some skill set built up. Although I worked throughout, I was doing a research. I was a research scholar, but that was not applicable to working in social impact itself, right? So what I'm saying is that I think, so for example, let's say even if you're coming out of college, but then you have built up internships where you have organized a conference, where you've organized workshops, which shows that you know how to set up a meeting, you know how to invite people, you know how to market the event, and you've gotten people out to those, right? Those are all, I think it's a combination. You need to have both. I think maybe in the job sector nowadays, and this is the trend, your skill sets are going to be outweighing probably your educational background. Your educational background will matter in certain job roles. If you're doing, like, if you're going to apply for a research institute, or you're going to work in writing policy briefs and so forth, it's going to, but for other roles, it's not going to weigh in as much. So if I'm looking for a communications person, honestly, I could care less if they are in university grad. I need to know, have you written a blog? Have you, do you know how many followers have you gained for your blog? Those are the benchmarks I'm going to be looking for. But if I wanted to get an advocacy director, I would look for, now this is a director level position, right? I would expect that they would have some educational background, because that makes me understand that they have the knowledge of government and policy. And then I will see, okay, what communities have you organized? So that would be a combination of both that I'm going to seek in that role. So I think it depends on your sector. It depends on your job function, whether or not you should pursue a certificate or an educational background. I think you should, anyway, in general, try to get a 4-year degree anyway, for your own well-being and good and understanding of how the world works, because it is a very powerful thing to have that education.
They say game recognizes game, but I say nerd recognizes nerd. And I say it as a compliment.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think I'm going to jump in with 2 quick last questions, and just put some our podcast next week will be Faith Adam, who works on sustainability with Canada and has a really interesting background. So that'll be up later today, the announcement. And then just talking about interfaith peace building. So Leah has a great online training program that people, often through university, but sometimes throughout, that does a lot of interfaith dialogue, Search for Common Ground, Alliance for Peace Building, FETSER. So two last questions, because we want to be respectful of time. How can people help MCN? So like, what is, obviously resources is one thing, but what other ways could people assist in your work, or what other partners do you recommend people engage with, both to be informed but to upskill?
Yeah, great. So the way to help MCN is really, sign up for our newsletter and become a subscriber, because that way you would be in touch with the types of work that we're doing. We are, as I said, we are mobilizing the community community members to support this resolution to be passed in New York City Council. So if you're in the New York City area, then definitely follow us on that. Follow us there. Attend our events. We must hold. I would say this: become a volunteer, and it doesn't have to be just MCN. If you are looking to explore careers or do career changes or anything, become a volunteer at an organization. And I know that it might be stressful on your time, but it opens up your network. It's a way of opening up your network. You might be very engaged with the work that we do, and that will allow you to maybe build a pipeline to maybe eventually organization at MCN, or be part of certain policy actions that we take. But I think overall, knowing who we are, following us on social media, subscribing to our newsletter, coming out to our events are ways that MCN, that you can definitely help MCN advance.
Okay. And then so one more follow-up question: what networks are you part of, as an organization, that because we're all bounded in wonderful ecosystems. So if someone's interested in peace building, interfaith dialogue, community organizing, like what's what are the larger,
Yeah.
let's say, ecosystem networks you're part of that others might want to look up as well?
Of course, yeah. So, we're part of Religions for Peace, which is a group of faith institutions all over the world that are trying to advance peace in the world. We are part of like the interfaith community of New York City, and this is a whole bunch of churches, synagogues, and mosques who are working to advance issues of homelessness, anti-poverty, criminal justice here in the New York City area. Our youth work, who are our partners there? Like the Department of Youth and Community Development. They're the ones work with schools, networks of high schools that we work to gain to implement our youth programs. Those are certain networks that we have. And then I guess, let me just think right now. Oh my God. What other networks? We're part of a national also group of Muslim serving organizations. So, Muslims are about 3.45 million Muslims in all of United States. We're part of a national group of all these different organizations working to advance the needs of Muslim Americans. It's called the USCMO. There's MGAGE USA. We're part of those networks to advance these needs. So yeah.
Wonderful. So I hope people will check out the networks. And just the final question before we wrap up. Obviously, you're a busy person, but what are you doing in terms of upskilling or something you've watched on Netflix has nothing to do with upskilling, just anything like that is occupying your mind in a positive way that you just might recommend others take a look at?
Yeah. I'm going to go back to, I want to learn video editing skills. And I know it sounds like, what? Like you're a thought leader, you want to do video editing? Yeah, I do. Because if I were to produce a video like this and present it, I need to know how to do that. I need to be able to, I want to write op-eds. How do you write good op-eds? How to be a good writer? Do video editing so that, videos get way more clicks and views than if someone were to write something. So I want to learn video editing skills. Yeah.
Okay. So there is a great network. I think it's called the Op-Ed Project, which tries to, and I think they provide training. I don't know if you know, they provide training particularly to women innovators to get their voices in media. So you might check it out. So we're going to finish here. We went a full hour, but thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, time, and you could do a really interesting series of courses on capacity building for not just your community, but for others. I encourage you in your spare time to explore that. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Again, next week we'll have Faith Edom. So stay tuned for that. We're doing weekly this 10th season, apart from a few breaks when we're traveling. Check out our course on Maven. And please, this podcast will be up on our, so this is the live stream. You can watch on LinkedIn and YouTube, and it'll be converted to a podcast within about a week. So you can check it out on our podcasting platform. And any last comments, Aniqa, before we sign off?
I want to just say, keep trying to, good luck, and keep trying and follow your dreams and goals, because never give up on that, because at the end of the day, you will reach your goal with persistence, perseverance. So yeah.
I enjoyed myself very much, and thank you for everything you taught me, and thank you for your wonderful work to make New York and the US and the world a better place. Thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you so much. Bye.